Is Pokemon actually popular here in Japan? How is the Pokemon experience here different from in other countries? And what kind of Japan-only merch, events, and experiences can you enjoy on your next trip to Japan? Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, it's Charles. How are you today? We are back on the Pokemon Journeys grind as of this week, but today we are going to turn our eyes and ears to a question from the community, a question about how Pokemon is treated in Japan. Is it just for kids, or is it also a hit among adults? What's unique about the Pokemon experience here, and is Pokemon bread actually tasty? We are in for a fun chat here today, so kindly request your Machoke to cross-chop that like button for the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe to feed my dojo fish Yusha. He is hungrier than a halucha, and let's jump right in. Today's community question comes from Fizzy Smith, who asks, you like to give insight on how the East, or more specifically Japan, feels about certain topics pertaining to Pokemon. So would you know how the Japanese feel about Pokemon in general? Is it an obscure cartoon and game people get for their children, or is it more of a cultural mascot for them? I get that it wouldn't be an important aspect to everyday life in Japan, but I am curious on how it is perceived in respect to other anime, real-world events, and any popular trends going on over there. Good question, Fizzy Smith. I get the impression that the words Pokemon in Japan often conjure up these images of painted Jigglypuff jumbo jets from the peak of the Pokemon craze, or crowds of people parading the streets in Pikachu outfits. And while these are not exactly an everyday thing, there is no doubt that the Pokemon experience in Japan is something quite different from what you experience in other countries. It's on a completely different level and in some pretty wild ways. So to answer the first part of your question, Pokemon is far from an obscure cartoon and game that people leave their kids to enjoy. And while it is very popular among children, it's something that many adults enjoy as well, and adults are becoming an increasingly large percentage of the fan base year after year. Whether they're playing the games, making cute Pokemon bentos for their kids, pinning cute plushies to their bags, rocking a Metamon soda shirt out in Shibuya, putting a picture of a Gengar in their Instagram pics in order to try and look edgy, or even gathering in the heart of downtown for a big Pokemon Go raid, or grabbing a Pokemon-themed beef bowl for dinner at Yoshinoya. There are plenty of adults enjoying what Pokemon has to offer. And so outside of the true old man shuckle level geezers out there, pretty much everyone is familiar with the basic premise of Pokemon, and it has a fond place in the hearts of many people, young or old. This is true in Japan as much as it is true around the world. To answer the next segment of your question, I suppose that Pikachu and friends do serve as cultural mascots in a sense. And I think that the Japanese having a stronger affinity for cute mascots and cute multimedia franchises, more so than many other cultures, has really allowed Pokemon to flourish in the public eye, much like Hello Kitty or Doraemon or Anpanman before it, but to an even greater degree because it's just so scalable and does a much better job of bridging the generation gap than those other properties do. This cultural receptiveness towards cuteness that seems less common among Western adults who try their best to shun cute or childish things like cartoons about funny monsters as soon as they become teens so that they can pretend to be cool in front of people who don't actually care about them or probably even like them. This is something that has made Japan somewhat of an incubator for multimedia properties rooted in cuteness, and although Pokemon is one of the few that has been very successful across the globe, the real magic of Pokemon is something that has always remained at least partially locked here within the confines of Japan. That is to say that the experience of Pokemon is quite unique here. And I don't think that the way Pokemon is experienced in Japan is something that's really transferable to any other country. At least not on quite the same scale that it is in Japan. And this is partially due to this receptiveness towards cuteness that has been a big thing here ever since the 1970s. The roots of cuteness culture in Japan is another topic altogether, but it does so happen to be the case that a lot of Japanese people, especially Japanese girls in their teens, 20s, and 30s, very much like cute things. And cute characters are everywhere in Japan. They are very well accepted even in the big boy industries like insurance and banking, where they often appear in the marketing materials. And this cuteness culture has established the breeding ground in which Pokemon has made its way into people's lives in very curious ways. I'll give you some examples of that in just a moment, but I just wanted to note that, as you suggested, while I wouldn't exactly call it an important aspect of everyday life, it is certainly an aspect of everyday life, to at least some extent for many people, whether they like it or not, due to the inclination to enjoy cute things, which we just discussed, as well as absolutely ridiculously successful marketing. When we think of Pokemon merchandise in Japan, we often think of the Pokemon Center, but really that is only the tip of the iceberg, and apart from the 11 Pokemon centers here in Japan that are dedicated to the sale of Pokemon goods, you see Pokemon pop up all over the place in advertising, commercials, store windows, street displays, convenience store shelves, literally anywhere you go, unless you're living in the woods by yourself, farming your own vegetables and refusing to interact with society. This is the big difference of experiencing Pokemon in Japan versus experiencing Pokemon in other countries. Here, it is simply all around, where in other countries, you typically have to seek out your Pokemon experiences. Even if I hated Pokemon, it would be difficult to avoid seeing Pikachu during my daily commute. That is how widespread it is, at least in the large urban centers. Just to give you a handful of examples of the interesting experiences, products, and events that crop up around Pokemon here in Japan. Pokemon bread, chocolates, and other candies are a mainstay at grocery stores. Pikachu-themed vending machines can be found all around cities. Dedicated Pokemon cafes with themed menus are operated in Tokyo and Osaka. Many cell phone shops and seemingly unrelated businesses have billboards or advertisements with Pokemon tie-ins. Pop-up stores selling Mompoke maternity and baby goods pop up in Tokyo from time to time. Official Pokemon engagement rings can be ordered from high-end jewelers like Ginza Tanaka. Season-defining Pokemon clothing collaborations unfold with all sorts of clothing brands, from Uniqlo to H&M to Glam. Baskin and Robbins, McDonald's, and other food chains, they put out awesome Pokemon-themed foods every year. The cards, they have a big presence across the countless trading card game shops in Japan. Trains or buses painted with Pokemon decor appear from time to time. Japan Rail even holds this Pokemon Stamp Rally in summer, wherein passengers travel to specific stations to collect Pokemon stamps and then proceed to a goal station to collect a prize and a Pokemon stamp book, with which they can then travel to dozens of other stations in order to collect more Pokemon stamps. Epic Pokemon Go events are held in areas like Yokohama and even in the Tottori Desert. And on the topic of Pokemon Go, due to the very compact nature of Japanese cities, it is still very common to see groups of 20 to 30 people gathering in a public park for a raid battle. And in my area, I also see young or elderly couples out for a Pokemon Go walk from time to time. Pokemon Go aside, there are all sorts of other large-scale Pokemon events in Japan, whether it be the Pokemon Festival in Ikebukuro or Pokemon Outbreak in Yokohama. There's a lot to see and a lot to enjoy year-round. One thing that I absolutely love is that every Pokemon movie still gets a major theatrical release here in Japan, which is a real pleasure to enjoy each year, and it reminds me that the very first video I actually made on this channel 3 years ago or so was about the Pokemon I Choose You movie, which was about to come out in Japan back then. It was the first cringy video of many cringy videos, and I can't say that I recommend watching it. Anyways, there are even Pokemon manholes in cities across various regions. For instance, I went to Kagawa Prefecture last year in autumn, and there were Slowpoke manholes, I think 16 or so of them around the city. The reason for that being that Slowpoke's Japanese name is Yadon, which sounds like udon, and Kagawa is famous for udon. Pretty cool. The list of cool Pokemon products and crossovers and events and experiences that you can enjoy here, that list just goes on and on and on and on, but I think you get the point. Pokemon is all over Japan, and if you like Pokemon, Japan is a great place to be. And if any of you happen to make it over here for a trip sometime, I highly encourage you to indulge in some of the things that I've described here and to see what other great Pokemon experiences and goods there are to consume here in the land of the Rising Remoraid. To address the last segment of your question about how Pokemon is perceived relative to other anime trends and real-world events, Fizzy Smith, as you'd expect, nothing trumps serious real-world events when it comes to what the public eye is honing in on, something that we are all aware of right now as we've experienced this whole stay-at-home for 2 months deal. And there are a lot of anime that take over the spotlight for a while, but the difference between these big real-world events and these popular seasonal anime or other multimedia franchises is that Pokemon is very consistent. It just doesn't go away. Much like Nintendo or Disney, it's always booming. It's like this eternal entity of happiness that doles out the smiles and pulls in the yen, and it just never runs out of energy. And as a result, there is rarely a day when I don't see something Pokemon related when I'm out and about doing my business. It has just become that successful. Not everyone cares about Pokemon in Japan, of course, but it is very much present around us. So yeah, it is not like the whole nation is gathered around the TV to see if Go's Reboot is actually leaving the anime, but Pokemon has a big presence in Japan, and Japanese people generally seem to hold very positive attitudes about this series, even if they are not personally interested in it. So Pokemon in Japan, it is far from obscure, it is almost omnipresent, and it is a real pleasure soaking it in every day. And with that, we will wrap up today's community video, but thank you for tuning in, everyone. I'd definitely like to show you some Pokemon cafes or other interesting Japan-only Pokemon phenomenons, events, experiences, goods, cool things that are only out in the wild here in Japan. So if you're interested in seeing something like that, be sure to drop that Brock Pan on the like button and just let me know what kind of stuff you would like to see. Well, thank you for tuning in. I hope that you all have a very healthy, happy, and safe weekend. And as always, let's chat.